Every week, journalist Bob Sigall takes his readers back in time through his newspaper column, Rearview Mirror. The stories vary. Factoids you may not know about a famous person, or reminiscing about your favorite restaurant that's no longer around. For me, it's Ryan's, compadres, and that banana pie from Flamingos. Fortunately for Bob, there's no shortage of memories.
One of my readers asked me whether there were tunnels that connected Chinatown in the early part of the last century. And the water table is too high for any tunnels to survive. There are a couple buildings that do have a basement, but there are no tunnels that connect different buildings to downtown. It's all by accident that I became a writer. I was a business consultant in Honolulu for 42 years, and I was hired by HPU to be an adjunct professor of marketing for their graduate business school. I gave my students an assignment that required them to go to 2 business networking meetings, meet 6 business owners, and get one to give them a tour of their business. And the first semester, one of my students reported that Bank of Hawaii, where I banked, was founded by a parade of gold coins taken out of a competitor, First Hawaiian Bank, by angry customers, Castle and Cook, who were ticked off that a check of theirs was bounced in the 1880s. And I thought, you know, I banked there and I've never heard this story. And then another student reported that Metagold was originally a butter that Continental Creamery sold in 1901 and was named in an employee contest. The winning answer received $25. And I grew up with Metagold and I never heard that story. So it dawned on me that every Hawaii company had a great story, and my friends at the gym convinced me that I should put it together in a book. They're named The Companies We Keep. When book 3 came out in 2010, the newspaper asked if I would write a regular feature. And I gave them some ideas and they picked a couple of them, and they called it Rearview Mirror, and it first began in April of 2011. You know, sometimes I find things by accident, like I'm looking through the newspaper archives online and I find something on the same page that interests me and I end up writing about that. Or I'm just driving around town and I look at a certain location and I wonder what was there before. So frequently I ask my readers if they have input about things, or they ask me questions. What I'm looking for when I'm choosing stories is a wow factor. 3 things that blow my mind, blow the readers' minds, things that astonish people. And you know, sometimes that's hard to do. You know, we know a lot about, let's say, McKinley High School, but the average person who went to McKinley High School may not know that it had 5 locations and 3 previous names. One of my editors had a picture of an explosion at Hanauma Bay in the 1950s and asked me to look into it. And as far as I can recall, that's the only time they gave me a topic. And they were actually building a trench through Hanauma Bay for the first trans-Pacific cable for telephone service to come ashore. They blew a trench down the middle of the bay, if you can imagine that. Everybody knows Duke Kahanamoku, but very few people know that he almost died of the Spanish flu during World War I. So I'm always looking for stories about well-known people in Hawaii, as well as companies and churches and military bases, nonprofits, schools, that give us some insight into, you know, who we are as a people. I'm blown away that there's so many great stories about Hawaii. I did have a few rumors that I was interested in getting to the bottom of when I began my research. So one is that Tripler was painted pink accidentally. There happened to be 200,000 gallons of pink paint, and they said, what do we do with it? And they decided to paint Tripler pink. Not the case. Tripler was painted pink to hide the red dirt of Maunalua Ridge that was expected to blow on a white hospital. The chief architect and chief engineer loved hearing the rumors go around, and it wasn't until they were both fairly elderly that their families convinced them to come forward and set the record straight. One of my readers asked me about Holmes Hall and what its history was. It's the engineering department at the University of Hawaii. And I looked into it, and it turns out that Jasper Holmes was the first Dean of Engineering for the University of Hawaii. Jasper Holmes was a code breaker during World War II at Pearl Harbor. We were listening to the Japanese radio broadcasts and we were decoding them at Pearl Harbor. And we found out, for instance, that the Battle of Midway was going to take place. This is in the first 6 months of the war. And because of that information, we were able to increase our presence at Midway, beat the Japanese in the first major battle of the war. Jasper Holmes played a key role in that code-breaking process. He also wrote some books after the war that a friend of his gave to Gene Roddenberry, who was the producer of Star Trek. And he said a number of his stories ended up being borrowed by Gene Roddenberry and influenced battle scenes and other storylines in the Star Trek original television series. I love hearing that, some local guy had a role in things that took place way beyond Hawaii, such as the development of Star Trek as a television series. I invited my readers to write about the top 10 gone but not forgotten Oahu restaurants from the past. And the #1 restaurant was the Willows. And it was actually by, several percentage points above the next one, which are places like Leaky Leaky Drive-In and Columbia Inn and Flamingo Restaurant and the Bistro. So many places that fondly were remembered by my readers. Whenever I write about restaurants or cafes or bars and nightclubs, that's when I get the most response because, all of us, patronize these places all of the time. Spence Cliff was one of the major chains in Hawaii. 50 years ago, they had over 50 restaurants at one point, like the Tahitian Lanai, or Kelly's Coffee Shop, or Popo's, or Tiki Tops, the Gourmet. They had restaurants in Waikiki, they had restaurants downtown. One of the stories I like about Tahitian Lanai is that Ron Jacobs organized a party for everyone that had been fired by Henry J. Kaiser. And Henry Kaiser came to this party, bought everyone a round of drinks, apologized, for having to cut back on the staff at his radio and TV station. He told them that someday he hoped he would have a chance to hire them back again. I thought it was really, nice of him to go to this event. You had to have a card. It was a pink card because Henry's favorite color was pink. Spence and Cliff Weaver sold it to a Japanese firm in the 1990s, and one after another they closed until Fisherman's Wharf was the last restaurant remaining. I tend to think that my readers are probably over 50, and some of them are probably in their 80s or 90s. And the types of things I write about are hitting this period in their life when they probably had a car available to them and a driver's license and a few dollars in their wallet or their purse, and they were going out to places like Scotty's Drive-In and Rainbow Rollerland, and they were buying, 5 hamburgers for $1 at Kapiolani Drive-In, which became Wailana Coffee House. And they have these memories of things that, sometimes are long gone in Hawaii. And so that's, I think, my sweet spot. The types of things that were available when my readers were in their teens and 20s. A lot of what I've been writing about recently has been first-person experiences. Like I wrote about people working in the school cafeteria when they were kids, or eating the cafeteria food. And it's not necessarily the kind of things that a historian would write about, but it's interesting to me because it's a first-person account of some of these things. And I hope 100 years from now that what I've done is preserve some of these stories so that we have a treasure trove of people's firsthand experiences to deal with, so that in the year 2200 we can look back on this era and have a good sense of what it was like for us to be here in Hawaii at this time.
PBS Hawaii continues a tradition of storytelling thanks to your generosity. If you'd like to support our mission, please visit pbshawaii.org and click on the donate button. For Home is Here, I'm Kala'i Miller. Ahui ho.